Hi there, Glenn Tranter here. I'm looking forward to chatting to Prosper on the Online Prosperity Show, where we're going to step through how you can save 100 minutes a day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, where we dive deep into the stories and strategies of extraordinary individuals who are making a significant impact in their fields today. Now, today I'm actually thrilled to have Glenn Tranter with us once again, and obviously this is going to be an exciting episode. Now, Glenn, how are you doing, my man?
I'm excellent, Prosper, and thank you so much for having me as a returnee to your show.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if somebody creates magic, why not bring them back? I mean, if you are literally helping people reclaim 100 minutes a day in just 6 weeks, we need that productivity juice in and around us. Okay, so the last time we were just talking about your story and everything else, but today we're going to dive deep into that productivity hack that you have discovered and how people can actually utilize it. Now, for those that are meeting Glenn for the very first time, let me just take you out of the rock you've been hiding under. This is, as he says, his second episode with us, and Glenn is a productivity maestro who can magically conjure up an extra 100 minutes in your day. So this basically makes your work-life balance not just a dream, but an actual tangible reality. So he's like a how can I say this? A productivity wizard minus the wand. And he's just been telling me he's now knows how to renovate homes as well. And it's something that only a productivity person or somebody who knows how to manage their time can actually be able to do. So even without a wand, he does have a tools box, and we're going to be exploring those tools today. And for those that don't quite know, Glenn's journey has been both inspiring and also enlightening. At some point, when he was 8 years old, he played in a basketball game, even despite them losing, was it 92 to 6 or 96 to 2? You just kept loving
90, 96 to 2. I was an 8-year-old playing in under 16s.
Absolutely. So Glenn is here to share with us his latest insights and tips that can help transform your life and business from chaos to clarity. So grab your favorite productivity app or journal and sit back, and let's just get ready to start reclaiming our days back. Now, Glenn, I mean, obviously we've spoke before, and today, we are focusing on how, as a leader, people need to manage their time to get the most important work done. And you help leaders and teams reclaim 100 minutes daily. Can you maybe walk us through your unique approach and how it actually differs from all the other traditional time management techniques out there?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the biggest thing for me is one size doesn't fit all. We're all unique. We all have our strengths. We all have our preferences, and we also have some weaknesses as well. So, what used to frustrate me with time management, every time years ago when I went through time management training, I was taken through one size fits all methodologies. And that kind of works and kind of doesn't. And so my view is that we need to treat everyone as an individual. So I love one-on-one coaching sessions. I love because we can really adopt the techniques for the individual. I love group sessions because we can still personalize that for the individual. So the very first thing I do with someone when they say they want to work with me, I get them to complete an online diagnostic. So I'm asking them for their strengths, their weaknesses, their objectives, and then how they rate themselves in a number of criteria with how they work. That way I can get some true insights about the individual and I can tailor the sessions for them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. You know what, Glenn, when I was growing up, our teachers or our parents would make us raise our hands and say, no two fingers on the same hand are of the same height. So that means each and every one of us has different mannerisms, has different values and things that hold them to account. Now, with what you're saying the tools that are out there are designed to be just a one size sort of fit all. How is that? How is that wrong? I mean, a clock would only what did they say? A clock would be correct at least two times at any given moment. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like any two people, they have a certain level of organization that they might like. So I have three children, and unnamed, it'll be one child who was exceptionally messy, but that's the way how this child preferred to work. Whereas the two other children were quite tidy. You'd go into their bedrooms and everything sort of had its place and they were well structured. It had no reflection as to did one child get more done or achieve more than the other one. It's just how their natural preferences were. If we flow this into a workspace, then let's look at email as an example. So some of my customers who are super, super productive, they have inbox zero. So they have zero emails in an inbox. They're quite well structured and organized. I've got other customers who are super, super productive that go, well, I'm not going to waste time with inbox zero. So they've got a crowded inbox, but they're still super, super productive because the workflow that we've got behind them. So, and I liken it, what I do when I design someone's inbox, I ask them about what's their favorite hobby? What's their favorite pastime? Do they have a garage? What does it look like? So when they will explain that to me, I'll then start asking a question. So if it's a garage, do you have your rakes and shovels hanging up on the wall, or is it just a hot raving mess where everything's thrown in there? And what I'm really trying to understand is their personal preference. So there was one person who I was coaching earlier this year, and the pastime that the person had was painting. So they had a dedicated painting room at home. That was their sanctuary. And when I asked them how was their paints organized, they had this really simple filing system where they had the paints together in sort of sequence by color. They had their paintbrushes and some cleanup rags and so on like that. So quite a simple filing system. When we looked at their email, I stopped counting. They had 92 email folders and they couldn't keep up with the overhead. And I was able to highlight that there was a disconnect between how they preferred to work, which was their painting system, and their inbox, how they were trying to manage their email. So that's the disconnect. Whereas one size fits all methods don't take that into account. They're just looking to try and sort of saying, let's slam it in there and it'll be okay. It's the tailoring of where we're really getting our time savings.
I like that because while you're talking about the inbox zero, I've read all those time productivity hacks and things like that. And I know in my inbox right now, there's 248 emails, and they're
Yep.
all coming from different aspects and parts of my life. But I can go in there and figure out the one that I want and
Yep.
actually make use of it. And when you were talking about the garage during the weekend, I was actually looking for a little shovel, and we couldn't find it. Only to find it had fallen behind the shelf because, well, obviously
Mm.
nobody really takes good care of that. So maybe that's just how other people are wired, and I like how you distinguish that because some people might not work in that sort of operation. Now, what initially excited you about getting into this realm? Like what brought you into productivity?
Yeah. So In the previous session, I spoke about how I'd been a high achiever and worked my way up through the ranks and worked in corporates, and I was involved in IT consulting, had this big international job, and that I burnt out. So, um, and my wife used to tell me I couldn't keep it up, and I just ignored that well-meaning advice and said it wouldn't happen to me. And next minute, you know, it did actually happen to me. And I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. So I didn't work for 15 months because of that. So the recovery took me quite a period of time. I got into meditation to help me with my recovery. And I was involved in meditation classes whilst I was unwell. And I was just gobsmacked to discover that 70 to 80% of the classes were there because they were coping with either stress, anxiety, or depression because they couldn't cope with their jobs. And I was someone who'd always got a lot done, but had some poor disciplines around managing it. And that steered me down into the productivity path. So I worked for a company for 8 years in that path, and really learnt a lot about it. And that's just excited me. It was the excitement around helping others.
Absolutely. But when you started, I mean, you initially you struggled to define your niche because obviously, like you say, so many people are coming from so many different walks of life.
Yeah.
It would be not easy for you to come across, the right specific person with the right
Yep.
need for the services and the tools that you were giving. So how did
Yeah.
you go about this? And were you successful in the end?
Yeah. So when I first went out for business for myself, I didn't want to miss out on any of the market. So I tried to go fishing in the biggest sea of possible. And I found it so hard to catch fish because I didn't have a niche. I hadn't really defined what my ideal customer. People would ask me who were so much more better at sales and marketing than myself, who was my ideal customer? I'd respond with some generic comment like, well, anyone could be my ideal customer. And I hadn't narrowed it down. And then I realized, and it took me quite a bit of trial and error and fumbling my way around, um, that it was either a leader or an emerging leader or key users. So it was those people who had been a younger me who were either working their way up through the ranks who had reached a senior position. They were high achievers. They had heavy workloads, and corporates tended to be the space because that was my background that I worked in. So they tended to be in corporates, and they were people who were trying to balance everything as best they could. So they were forever juggling balls in the air. I could relate to them and they could relate to me.
I can only imagine because if you're starting, I mean, the internet is just this wide array of people that have the
Yep.
potential to be your customer. But like you say, if you haven't, really focused on the right kind of people with the right kind of pain, it will be difficult. That would have also meant that you would have been on just about any social media platform, just hoping that somebody would stop by and have a chance to have a
Yes.
chat with you. Did you do anything
Yeah.
along these lines?
Yeah. So what I did, I scaled back my social media platforms as well. So LinkedIn is where I tend to focus mostly on. So I use a combination of posting content and then connecting with people and an outreach approach with them to see whether they might fit my profile, and with what I've got, is that something that they need at the moment. So it took me, to be all in all honesty, Prosper, it took me a number of years to narrow this down by trial and error and gone from wasted effort to a much more targeted approach that I've got nowadays. And the hit rates have obviously gone up as I've gotten myself more targeted.
Absolutely. So you reclaimed for yourself 100 minutes a day then?
Yeah, I've reclaimed a lot of time for myself. I've gone through so many ways of, and I think if you go back to each individual, how do you learn the best? I actually learn the best by trial and error. Something will really stick to me. If I've screwed it up, then I'll go, well, I won't make that mistake again. Um, I'm not a great person of sitting in a classroom. I've got to get my hands dirty. I've got to touch it, feel it, and then apply it. And it just makes more sense to me. So I think in starting up a business, it's not the most effective way in going through it, but it happened, so you can't undo the past. You can only look at going forward. How can you make it more effective going forward? So that's how I focus.
Absolutely. Now, Glenn, from what you're saying, this burnout actually had to happen for you to be able to then have this, like the kind of person that you learn, like you say, you learn from the actual experience. Because sometimes, I think it was Tony Robbins that mentioned this, that life is happening for us, not necessarily happening to us. Would you look at it, now that you've mentioned it this way, that this burnout had to happen in order for you to then come out victorious with this newfound, productivity consulting that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt, Prosper whatsoever. I doubt I would be in this space if I didn't do it, if I didn't go through it. And I don't think I'd be as happy as what I am now, because my job and what I do is so rewarding when that I'm helping people save time. I'm helping people achieve their goals. I'm helping people um, leave work earlier, work less hours to live more fulfilling lives, have dinner with their families. When someone says to me, Glenn, you changed my life, like it is so, so rewarding. So there is no doubt of going through, if I didn't go through what I did, that I wouldn't be here today. And I wouldn't have all of the experiences and also the empathy for people who are going through it, where what I do once a year for myself, I have inbox zero myself, but I want to be in the shoes and understand of how my customers are. So once a year for a month, I turn off inbox zero. I go to a crowded inbox again and put myself in chaos again just to experience that, because I tend to forget things as I go along. I assume I've always like that. And then when I go back into the way of feeling under more pressure of things, they're not as calm, that I'm having to think about and remember where stuff is. It's just making myself work so much harder. So I do it for a month and then I quickly go back to my inbox zero, because I'm just trying to live a day in the life of my customers. So I live a month in the footsteps of my customers.
I think that's where empathy is built, because if you've experienced it and you know exactly how it works, you would then showcase and know how to get them overcome that. Now, why 100 minutes though? I mean, 1 hour is what, 60 minutes, and then you've got 30 minutes and an extra 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Why 100?
Yeah. So I was saying before, when I first work with somebody, what I do is I get them to complete is what I call a pre-diagnostic beforehand. So I'm trying to get their baseline and understand their objectives and their challenges and what they'd like to achieve. And then after working with them for 6 weeks, I get them to complete a post-diagnostic survey, which I'm looking for what has changed from when we worked with them 6 weeks ago. And one of the questions that I ask them is how much more time, the additional time they're spending on their most important work. And that came out to be 1.4 hours over a range of things. So I started marketing 1.4 hours. And I was caught up for a coffee with a friend of mine who's involved in marketing, and he's talking about the business, and he goes, "Yeah, I really love what you do." And he's scratching his head. And he goes, "For the life of me, I don't get why you call it 1.4 hours and you don't call it 100 minutes a day." And I've gone, Gee, I never thought of it like that. I didn't look it through the lens like that because marketing is not where my strengths come from. So for you, Prosper, you would have done it in a nanosecond. Whereas myself, I was running around, I think it was for 3 months with 1.4 hours a day until he put me on the path. He says, well, that's 100 minutes a day.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, just looking at that number 1.4, first of all, there's pattern recognition when it comes to people. You never count time in terms of 1.4, or do you know what I mean? There's a certain way that you read time. And the fact that you've got more of a number to play with now, 100 sounds very much more tangible and bigger than 1.4. And wow, that is yeah, that is something right there. Now, obviously, you did mention, your many of your clients that you end up working with struggle with overwhelm. Well, what would you
Yeah.
say is the first step? I mean, obviously, when things are just everywhere, there has to be maybe a couple of steps that you want to take. For somebody who's really feeling overwhelmed and maybe their garage is all over the place or their bookshelf is looking like it's about to tip on itself and things of that nature. What are the first steps that you recommend somebody feeling overwhelmed at work?
Well, the first one is the easiest productivity thing there is, and that is to do less, to actually have a look to say, so what are you doing? Because generally, when we get overwhelmed, we get into this busyness mindset. We think everything is urgent. So we're responding to everything and we don't necessarily, well, we can't keep that up is the first thing, but we want to respond to things that make the most impact. So when someone is really overwhelmed, the first thing I do is I look at to say, so what are you doing? So we go through what they're doing, and there's 3 stages to this. The first stage is we look, what can we eliminate? And we do this like a hot knife going through butter. We're just saying, what can we slash off their task list that they shouldn't be doing anyway, that they just don't have to do? Um, we want to try and buy some space back. The second part of that is we look at to say, so if you're a leader, what can you delegate? So what should your team be doing, or what can you outsource? Because you could be even a solopreneur. So what's the other resources that you've got that your skills may not be so great? So my skills aren't great in marketing. So therefore, that'd be something I would delegate or outsource or get some help from artificial intelligence, for instance, to help me with that. And then the third step is to say, so what can you automate? So what's the technology that you've got that you're not using? Or is there some cheap technology we can get that you can get a massive return on investment straight away? So we look to eliminate, delegate, or automate, and outsource as part of the delegate component. So that's the first thing. And it's all right to have these ideas. So that's not necessarily some groundbreaking idea out there, but I have a worksheet where people actually will fill it out, making these decisions. So we'll do a quick brain dump, and then as they get work, they fill out the worksheet, making decisions, who they need to talk to, and when they plan to actually get it done. So that's the first thing that we do. Give them less to do, and we look at their email, because a big problem is the example that I used before. A lot of people can't keep up with the overhead of their email. It's actually not the volume of the emails they get. They say it's the volume, but it's how they've designed their email system, and they don't have a workflow for it. And the workflow, there needs to be a simple workflow. Email comes in. How do you respond to it? When do you respond? Versus an email comes in. It's a 2-hour piece of work. It's due next Friday. What do you do with the email? You need a simple workflow to manage that. And people will put them on lists and they'll try and remember them, or they mark them unread, or they put a red flag. They've got all these ways of doing it, and none of them may not be helping them. So it's, once again, depending of the application you're using, is it Gmail or Outlook, and how the individual, how do they want to design their garage or their favorite hobby, is a design that we take to that. So we want to give them less to do, and we want to give them a system that takes less overhead to actually keep the upkeep on.
Now, Glenn, I mean, obviously, this goes against just about anything, especially in the world that we live in. First of all, you have to look busy. Otherwise, people will throw things for you to do if you're not going to be doing that. And if your inbox is like on zero, for many people, that just kind of makes them feel like they're not busy enough or they're not doing enough work. And if your boss notices that, people are afraid they might be piled on with more responsibility and work, and that delegation will come their way. Isn't that what a lot of people are trying to avoid?
I think we only know what we only know. And when I look at people's roles, quite often they're not doing the harder parts of their role, which will get me into another part I want to talk about later of my 3-step plan. So this was just the first step: give them less to do, because what gets our attention is what we do, and there's parts of our role that it doesn't get our attention, and we don't have time for it. So that's a real important one. So I think we need to do things better. And if I'm a leader, then generally what I don't have enough time is thinking space. If I had more thinking space, then I could possibly make some better informed decisions as well. So we want to remove that urgency, remove that volume that we've got, so that the leaders can be really focused more so on the strategic part of their role. That's going to really make the difference to the role, the success of their team, and to really drive the results for the business.
I mean, obviously, once the leaders are taking their part or doing their part, to nurture that productivity within the workplace, it obviously creates a productive team culture. What are some of the pitfalls that maybe teams face, and how do you help them overcome them? Because obviously, if somebody is working to be productive and the other people might not be in that same mindset, that just creates friction, when it comes to work being delivered or shipped.
Yeah. Ultimately, like any team, it's the culture you want your team to live by. So high performing teams generally function at a high level by their default nature of their name. But there's a bit of a rub with high performing teams, because when there's those who aren't necessarily performing, they can frustrate the others in the team. And what the other team members tend to do is help raise their standards. So often I've worked with leaders in teams who will then cascade me down through their individual team members to help them be more effective at what they're doing. Because once again, it comes back to the old chestnuts that people only know what they know. They haven't been shown a different way, or it hasn't been tailored for them. And what seems like huge roadblocks in their way aren't necessarily roadblocks in their way. They just need to be shown a different way how to do it.
Understandable. But with the world we live in these days, there's a new app today, there's a new methodology of doing things, there's a new set of tools that people can utilize. And how does any of that sort of create that stability? Because most of the overwhelm is caused by shiny object syndrome anyway. And I think most people just want to do whatever, like you say, that is cheaper, better, faster, without actually noticing the implications of it all.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that you need to know yourself, what works for you and what doesn't work for you. You need to have a set of principles that how you effectively work by. So you mentioned before about some of the issues we see for teams. Teams nowadays, they communicate with tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams, and you often see these messages, they're just pinging nonstop where they've got a frame of mind and they're stopping and they've got to go and respond to this. Well, if you're in a role that's just a reactive role and that's all you do is respond to that, then that's a great way of working. But if you're in a role that requires some deep work where you need to think about that work, then by the team, there need to be some team rules that it's okay to turn the alarm off for a while so you can actually process your deep work. Because going to work, you can't just be involved in meetings all day and just responding to pinging messages all day. If you don't get your work done, you won't be a high performing team. And that's where people get overwhelmed and there's just gets a lot of frustration and members leave their team. So we need to be able to get the work done. So we've got to be able to blend where we're doing our deep work throughout the day, plus being able to respond to some of that reactive work. So we can't go too far one way and just do our deep work and not be a good team player. But we can't be the best team player who doesn't do any of their more complex work either. So it's getting that balance. So everyone for their role needs to understand what's the split of their role? What's the percentage split they need to be proactive doing their more complex work? And what's the percentage of the role they need to be reactive to? And for some people, that's an 80-20 split. Others, it's 70-30. Some, it's 60-40. It varies by individual. That's why we customize the approach to work for the individual. So we're blending it based on their role, based on what's expected of them.
Now, this calls a lot of self-awareness, a lot of personal development on the part of both anyone who's going to be obviously undertaking this productivity side of things. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier on was meditation and how it played a crucial role in your recovery and your own personal growth. First of all, do you recommend it? And then second, how do you then utilize this tool to incorporate mindfulness into the practices that you're obviously doing day to day and coaching others?
Yeah. So going through meditation was terrific for me. I don't use it anymore. I prefer instead, and I don't know why I've gone blank on the name, that I prefer to integrate exercise more rather than just sitting still. So, but I'm a huge fan of monotasking. And monotasking, whereas before I used to be a multitasker, thinking I could juggle so many balls in the air. So mindfulness practice is about monotasking a lot as well, so that we ultimately get more done when we monotask versus when we multitask. And one of the exercises that I take people through is that I get them to do an exercise where I get them to write down a statement where they monotask and I time them. And then I get him to write the statement again, doing it multitasking the second time, and I time them. And my statement is just multitasking really doesn't work. And they just have to number it sequentially underneath. The second time I get him to do it, they have to end up with multitasking really doesn't work, but they'll write an M and put a number underneath it, a U and a number 2, L and 3, and so on. There's at least a 20% degradation doing that same exercise when you multitask. It's
I'm actually
incredible.
looking at it and it's making my brain tired.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a light bulb moment for so many people. It's not funny. So we can get people and we could ground them very, very quickly again to say, well, okay, I had someone recently tell me that they're excellent at multitasking and that they were way better than anyone. And that was their competitive advantage. And I sort of said, oh, yeah, that's good, blah, 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 blah. And I said, would you mind doing this little exercise for me? They were 50% slower when they went with multitasking. They could not believe it. Um, so we changed the way how this person worked. Based on that, that's when they realized that's why they were going home feeling so drained, because they were just trying to juggling so many balls at the same time throughout the day. They were busy, but they weren't effective.
Mm, absolutely. That maybe explains why whenever I'm in public, I get very drained because maybe my brain is trying to focus on that person's clothes, that person's activity, is there a car coming, and I think
Yeah,
that could be what is actually happening with other people. Whereas when you're monotasking, like you're saying, your brain is just focusing on the one thing and looking for what would it look like when we have arrived. And so many people, yes, think this is, they think they can multitask, but I don't think that is something that is quite an efficient thing. Try actually juggling balls while you're driving your kids to school and see if that can actually work perfectly.
yeah,
No, obviously, Glenn, I mean, for somebody like yourself, you've been a sports person, you've been like in your past job, you've worked in a high efficiency type place, and now you're a coach. People might just be thinking, that just might not be me. I operate in a whole different way. This is something for people like Glenn. I don't have the height to play basketball, so that already disqualifies me. I don't have the right height to get onto this roller coaster. Maybe you can share a success story where your coaching has actually significantly transformed a client's life that wasn't you.
yeah, yeah. There's so many to choose from. I think the first thing is that we customize it. We just customize it, the coaching for everybody. So I'm not trying to invent little Glenn Tranters out there. So it's not like I'm trying to get mini me's out there, because the basis of what I do is one size fits all. So if I've got inbox zero, and if the customer prefers a crowded inbox, I don't have a problem with that. What I will do is I will vet that is a crowded inbox the best thing for them based on their preferences, because some people don't necessarily want to change just because that's what they're resistant to. So we just want to make sure that's not it. But if I use one scenario, there was a uh, a general manager of a division for a large company, John. And John's situation was he was completely and utterly overwhelmed, and he was a bottleneck for his department. And I went into John, and there was all these papers over his desk, and his email was out of control. So we sorted through his email, and we got that in place. And then we sorted through every piece of paper that was on his desk. And my question is, what's that? What do you need that for? Where is it? Is it a project? Is it something that can be filed, and so on like that? So we got some semblance of organization in place, and was coming up to a coaching session that I was having later on in the week. And John contacted me on the Monday. He says, Glenn, how's your weekend? And so on like that. He says, um, can I speak to you just off the record? I said, yeah, sure, John, what's up? He goes, got nothing to do. I said, what do you mean you got nothing to do? He goes, I've got nothing to do since you sorted everything out for me. I said, I started laughing. I said, excuse me for laughing, John. I said, your mindset is still in the old place that it was. Um, and so when I got in there later in the week for our next session, we then started going through all of the projects that he hasn't touched yet. We discovered there was a 3-year-old project that hadn't been started, that was still on their priority list, because he was just too busy in the chaos. And then what we did, we just put a simple, he had this whiteboard behind him that he just had some notes on. I said, do those notes mean? He says, no. I said, well, when your team comes in to your room, why don't we change the focus of the conversation? So we put 3 columns on the board. We had to do, doing, and done. So we listed his projects on the board in the appropriate columns. And then as his team was coming in, they started asking him about some of these projects and showing some interest. So he started getting volunteers on some of the projects. So it changed the culture of how he ran their team. And he ended up saying to his boss that he was embarrassed based on how he was working previously, that he felt he'd let the organization down. So it was a huge turnaround for John. And his manager didn't think John would have actually taken to the coaching at the start. So all I did was connect to the what's in it to me, what's in it for me, for John individually. And John was a super conscientious guy. And we just needed to be shown there was a different way to working, of what he previously thought was busyness to then he became this project guy, this collaborator of his team. He started giving his team, leading his team, giving him feedback and coaching his team. So he raised the level of not only his own performance, but the performance of his team and the culture and the happiness of his team as well. So I was so pleased for John and proud of John that he was open to taking the coaching.
Absolutely. I quite like that, because obviously if you can change somebody's way of life, it's going to ripple effect with the people that he's going to be working with and things of that nature. And that's quite a remarkable story right there. Now, Glenn, what would be the best way that people can start regaining their 100 minutes, especially working with you?
Yeah. So that I mentioned before, that the first way is do less. Do a stock take on what you've got. Anyone can contact me and I'll send them through my Taskbuster worksheet that will help them reduce what they've got on their plate. So they can assess what they've got on there. The first way, so do less. The second way is you want to remove the roadblocks. If you think about your day and you go in there with an intent for the day, and you're going to get through, let's say, your top 3 things for the day, and you get to the end of the day and you haven't got to number 1. The day's just disappeared. So you want to identify what's stopping you throughout the day. And you'll tend to find it's not huge things. It's little things like the number of interruptions we get. It's generally you get had a plan and just your emails out of control, getting all these messages. So then we start to identify, so what do you need to do about those? Can you do anything about them? And what would be the steps you need to take? Is it training or coaching that you need? Do you need to delegate to someone? What's the impact of not doing it? So once again, I have a worksheet for people to identify these things and to map out a path going forward. So do less, remove the roadblocks. And the third one I touched on before is what gets your attention gets done. And I'm a huge fan of planning, and with my planning, I have a weekly planning process that I call the strategic week map. And the strategic week map, what we do is we get people to reflect on their past week. Hey, was that a successful week or not? What happened in the week? Would I give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down or just okay? Projecting forward, what's the mindset that I need for the week going forward? So I just need to keep things rolling because I had a successful week, or is it a catch-up week that I need to do? Have I fallen behind on my strategic part of my role that I want to do? And before we put together what I call people where they put down a wish list, where they'll just list down all the things that I'm going to do and they never have time for, what I get people to do is I say, so how many hours are you going to work next week? So let's say they're going to work 40 hours. How many hours do you already have committed to meetings and work that you've got planned? So let's say they've got 20 hours already committed to meetings and plan. how many hours do they need to make an allowance for reactive time? Before I said we need to understand what's the percentage split between proactive and reactive work. So let's say I'm 20% reactive. So that's 8 hours. So that will leave me with, I've now got 12 hours available for the week. What are you going to do with that 12 hours? And look at your role. What's the most important work to achieve your bigger picture goals? Then how are you going to use that? And this helps people move away from getting caught up in urgency of busyness to actually starting to focus on what's going to make the biggest impact. And that's a weekly process that people do. So I call it the strategic week map, because what gets your attention gets done. If we don't put our strategic stuff in there, guess what? The non-strategic stuff will get done.
Mm, absolutely. And what would be the best way that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah. The best way to get hold of me, my website is glenn@glenntranter.com, or you can message me or call me from there. It's got my contact details. Or on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn each week. So I would love anyone to connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can certainly message me on LinkedIn or follow any of my comment or content that I put on there. And yeah, would welcome contact from any of your viewers of this podcast, Prosper.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously opening up those communication channels so that people can get a hold of you. Now, speaking of the viewers of this channel, a lot of them are people that have adopted a remote sort of working scenario where literally where you can work from just about anywhere. And I think on your website, I read somewhere that says your job is what you do, not where you do it. I mean, maybe you can work, maybe give us a few pointers as to how can people still maintain that, productivity, even if they are not in the normal environment that they normally operate from.
Yeah. So I'm a remote worker myself. So I practice what I preach. Um, and I think it's very important that we have a work area, but we have a plan of what we're going to do throughout our day. I actually shared on LinkedIn just today, there was a wonderful story in the Harvard Business Review about are you a micromanager, or are you someone who's too much hands off? And the story spoke about how with remote working, and since we've had COVID, that what we've got is that sometimes some leaders will try and they'll micromanage, and others will be too far hands off. So you've got to get the balance right. And getting that balance right becomes around having conversations with people, understanding. So how do you best work? What are you looking for? Here's what I need. It's just having the time to have those conversations. So I think when we're working at home individually ourselves, or if we're working remotely from a cafe or a library or wherever it is that we're working from, that we need to have some type of plan in place, that we need to have some form of working rhythm and method to understand that here's how I do my best work. So it doesn't matter where I am. I'm just doing my work, because it's just becomes an easy way of doing things. So for me, I, like everyone, I'm proactive, but I get things that are reactive throughout the day. So sessions like this, I can't respond to it. But I'll get off this session and I've got a little 15-minute catch-up session where I'm looking at those emails that are coming. What are the ones I need to respond to my customers? And if I don't respond to them, for me, sometimes it means lost business. So I've got to be strategic, but I've got to keep things moving throughout the day. So I use a combination of catch-up sprints throughout the day, because that works for my role. And for some of my customers, we do a similar thing, because they're in these such busy roles that they don't want to get weighted down by these huge amounts of emails and SMSs and Teams messages that they get throughout the day. So you just got to flex it, based on what works for you.
Absolutely. Well, Glenn, I can't thank you enough for the time that we've spent again, especially now that I know how to actually reclaim 100 minutes out of my day. Now, what exciting projects can we be on the lookout for that you're working on, for people that are meeting you for the very first time and want to be excited about what they can keep an eye out for in the future?
Yeah. So some of the exciting projects I've been working on, I've been working with organizations who are trying to reduce that level of workload overwhelm. So unfortunately, there was a situation last year that a team was going to work with me and they didn't have the budget, and one of their team members burnt out and had a complete and utter burnt out. So that prompted them to find the money to go and do it, but it was too late for this individual. So they were highly embarrassed and disappointed about that, because often people don't speak up that they need help when they truly do need help. And so the exciting work that I've been doing is I've been around this workload overwhelm, just trying to help people get more done in less time. Been a lot of work I've been doing and will be doing around helping people with both Outlook and Gmail, because people are just wasting time because they don't know how to use these tools properly and they don't have the structure in using these tools properly. And there's some executive programs that I'm running and will be opening up my diary for more, of helping executives make a bigger impact on the work that gets their attention. And it's similar to the productivity stuff we've been talking through throughout the day, but just pitching it at that higher executive level of freeing them up to give them more thinking time. And I love doing that work with the executives because the knock-on effect, that cascade and ripple effect, is significant for them.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've obviously regained a lot more than 100 minutes with this particular episode. I mean, if you understand that you can do less, remove all the roadblocks, and what you focus on is the thing that actually gets done, that is literally a shortcut or shorthand for you to actually live the best lived life. So Glenn, I can't thank you enough for sharing all these invaluable insights and practical strategies that people can literally start using right away. I mean, it's been an enlightening session. I didn't expect any less, knowing coming from the first episode that we did, and now we were actually just looking at the actionable tips that I think our viewers will be utilizing right away. So thank you so much, because time is one of those finite resources that we never get back. And if you find a way that you can actually harness it and utilize it to your best way, and with the right guidance, I think people will actually start living happier lives. So thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you so much, Prosper. And it's been wonderful getting an opportunity to chat with you again.
Absolutely. And if you're watching this video up until now, thank you so much. I know it's probably not 100 minutes long, but that was the whole point. We wanted to help you regain those 100 minutes. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends or people that are struggling to stay on top of their time, so that they too can start reclaiming their time. Because without that, so many people will be running around like headless chickens and not knowing what the next logical step would be. And if you find yourself wondering or getting distracted, just revisit this episode whenever you need that productivity boost. Until next time, stay productive and stay prosperous. Bye for now.